So this screencast will be quite long because I will go over a lot of information. So Monday was the 17th. We focused on context clues then, and we also focused on the power of the church. So Monday's done. On Tuesday, you're watching this screencast, and it will focus on a little bit on narrative writing, but also focus a lot on your CEE that you guys wrote a couple of weeks ago that many of you need to retake because um, you got an S, an S minus, or an N. So what's going to happen is everyone's going to retake it, and it'll just be a new grade in Power School. But I will also update your old grade. So again, everyone's going to retake it. It's going to just be not retake it. It's going to be a new assessment with a different source, and I will put in a new grade in classroom in Power School, but you will also have your old score replaced if you got an S, an S minus, or an N. So that's happening on Tuesday. You're watching the screencast, and we're also going to be practicing um, more context clues, and if we get a chance, also review the homework from the previous day. On Wednesday, the 19th, you're going to be taking the selected response for ELA in my class and also ELA. It's 14 questions, so you're gonna do about 7 questions per class. Um, there are quite a bit of sources. You are going to be reading and annotating them, and then you're gonna answer questions. Okay, so in order to get proficient, you have to get at least 9 out of 14. That's why I always set goals on your exit tickets. You have to get 9 out of 14 correct. I would love for you to get 14 out of 14. Right, that's perfect, right? But you need to get at least 9 out of 14. And with these assessments, this one is not going to go into Power School, the selected response one, because there's many standards in that assessment, but it does show us who needs more support, and we are going to support you. On Thursday, the 20th, that's when you will write the CEE that everyone's going to do. It'll be an assessment, but it'll also count as a retake for those students that would like to use it as a retake for their previous assessment. So that's happening on Thursday in my class. So you're going to be writing a CEE. On Friday, this is the big day where you will receive your sources to write your narrative, right? This is going to be the second part of your interim for ELA. You don't have an interim for social studies, but because we focus on a lot of the same skills, you are also going to take it in my class. So you'll take one interim for ELA in both classes. So on Friday, you will be given the sources. I believe there's 3 sources that you're going to read and annotate and start thinking of a story you would like to tell, right? A narrative. Now, this narrative will go in my gradebook. It will appear there. If you have any more questions on that, I'm more than happy to talk to you about that. Again, so on Friday, you're going to receive the sources. UC Davis, you'll start with me because you have me right after IR. And then the other classes, I think UCLA, you also start with, no, UCLA, you're going to start with in Ms. Black. And then SC, you'll start with me and finish with Ms. Black if you haven't had her by, I think you have her at the end of the day. So on Friday, you are reading the sources and thinking of a story. If you want to start outlining, you're more than welcome to. We'll give you a graphic organizer. Me and Ms. Black will be grading those. The biggest thing I want you to remember is for narrative writing, you need to have some sort of setting, right? You can't really jump into the issue necessarily unless the setting is the issue, right? That could, I think you guys have talked about that in ELA. But we need to know who the people are in this area. Introduce the characters in the setting. And then we're going to have the conflict, right? After the conflict, we're going to have this, the rising action. The rising action happens as a result of the conflict. At the very top, we're going to have the most exciting part of the story, where something major happens, and then we're going to work towards a resolution. Okay, this is the falling action. The end is going to be the resolution. The resolution does not have to have a happy ending necessarily. It can be a sad ending. It could be, but it should come to an end. Okay. Um, One thing that I noticed on your narratives is a lot of students had a lot, and I mean a lot of grammar issues, like misspellings and run-on sentences. You have to be very careful with that because let's say you are getting, so it's graded at 4, 4, and 2. It's graded at 10 points. You might get a 3, a 2, and a 1, which is a 6. And I don't think a 6 is considered mastery in this case. I'm not 100% sure, but that's a pretty low score, right? Some of you would have gotten a 2, but because you had so many mistakes, it lowered it down to a 6. So just be very careful with that. And chances are, if you are scoring a 1 on grammar and punctuation, you probably won't be scoring 3s or 3s on the other ones. You might score 2s because this 1 will impact the other scores because if we don't know what you're talking about. Again, so that's happening on Friday. The sources are really, really good sources, and you'll be able to develop a story based on that. So this is the review for CEE, and you should have a copy of this already, and you should have discussed it with your partners because that's what we're going to do in class. So the prompt said, are our ideas of Vikings correct? So this is the question. Are we correct about what we think of Vikings, right? It says develop the claim with a reason. So you needed a reason, an actual reason that is supported by 2 relevant pieces of evidence. So you needed 2 sources, right? You needed 2 sources. If you only use 1 source, that was a huge problem with your evidence already. Make sure to explain how your evidence supports your claim. So let's look at example A, student A. From the start, just looking at this, I can tell that this is not going to meet the criteria because it's really short. Now, some students are able to write really well in very small and short sentences, but this won't work. So this is student A. This student is from UCSC, I believe, or UCLA. That doesn't really matter where they come from, but that's, he or she said, our ideas of Vikings are rough, violent giants that wear helmets with horns. Well, we are wrong. When they are completely opposite, the Vikings watched the farm, fought, and had animals. Now, I can kind of understand what they're saying, but there's just a lot of issues with this paragraph, right? First of all, it's one whole paragraph that's a claim. I don't even know how to describe this. Our ideas of Vikings are rough, violent giants are wrong. That's what the student is saying, right? And this student could have said, our ideas of Vikings are wrong because they actually farmed and washed themselves, right? That could have been the claim. Instead of what they wrote here, there's just a lot of misspellings too. And it's just really confusing. So for this claim, I will probably give it an S- because it's just really confusing. This student did a good job at citing the source. And it does say, make sure it says 2 relevant pieces of evidence. It doesn't say 2 different, so that's okay. So according to source 1, it states, Vikings made razor tweezer combs out of bone and antlers and took showers each week, and they had great hygiene, and they also didn't wear helmets. Wore helmets, and with horns, there is no evidence to say so. So there is no explanation here. The evidence because they fought. So the student is saying that they were not ideas of Vikings being rough and violent is wrong because they washed themselves. So the evidence is kind of relevant here. So the evidence will be probably like an S plus. But I don't know if this evidence is all one piece. I think this student might have gotten pieces of evidence from the source and just kind of put them all together. And you can't do that unless you can do this, quotes, evidence. And then if you want to find another piece of evidence from that same source, you can do dot, 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 and then continue, and then close quote. So this evidence, if this evidence is all made up from one source and just put together, then this evidence would be probably an S at best. There is no explanation, so that's an N. Source one, so here I needed a transition, right? So this student could have rewritten his first reason here and then tackled on this evidence. And then here, this student needed a transition. In addition, Vikings did not just go to war, right? And then he could have said Vikings, see, I don't even know what this is. Vikings Akuli farm barley, rye, and oats. They also raised, there's a lot of misspellings, cattle, goats, pigs, sheep, and small farm. So again, this evidence is okay because they're focusing on that the Vikings did not just go to war, right? But I don't know why there's so many misspellings when you are literally copying from the source. This is an S. So overall, this piece of writing is an S minus or an N because there's no explanations, right? The claim is really rough. The evidence is okay. The evidence is actually okay. It's pretty good actually, but there's no explanations. Okay. Student sample B. The ideas of Vikings are wrong because they are misunderstood. Now, this claim is better than this one. It's better than this, the sample A. But I wish that there was actually a reason why we are wrong about the Vikings. We think that they are dirty. That's wrong. We think that they had horns. That's wrong. We think that they went to war. That's wrong, right? According to source A, according to source 1, it states, there is no picture evidence from the Vikings age to support that they wore horn helmets, and the only actual Viking helmet ever discovered did not have horns. So, okay, so this claim is, this evidence is okay. I like the evidence, but the issue is the claim, right? This is the problem, the misunderstood part. Why, how are we wrong about the Vikings? So the evidence, so the claim is like an S, the evidence is like an S plus, and then the explanation. Let's see what they said. People thought the Vikings wore helmets with 2 horns. If they wore helmets with horns, then why would only helmets discovered had no horns? The ideas of Vikings are wrong because they were misunderstood. This is about an S explanation. I love that they used a transition word here. Furthermore, in the same source it states, neither were Vikings scruffy, dirty, or smelly. Archaeologists have found all kinds of personal hygiene implements while excavating Viking sites, like tweezers, razors, combs, ear cleaners made from animal bones and antlers. Okay, so that is pretty good evidence. I like it. People thought that Vikings were unclean and scruffy. If that were true, then how could archaeologists find items for hygiene? Since those items were found, it explains that Vikings weren't scruffy or dirty or smelly. The ideas of Vikings were not true because they were misunderstood. I like that the student keeps bringing their claim, even though I'm not sure the claim is the strongest. That's actually a really good habit. In conclusion, the idea of Vikings were wrong because of misunderstood. I'm not sure what that means. Overall, so I will most likely when I give you the new CEE, I'm gonna give you different grades. I'll probably give you one for a claim, one for evidence, and one for explanation. Okay, and I almost like give you a grade for your grammar too because we want to avoid mistakes, like little mistakes like this. Sample C. The ideas of Vikings are incorrect because Vikings. So this you say are. because that's what the question is asking. Our ideas of Vikings are incorrect because the Vikings didn't wear horn helmets and weren't just sailing to war robbing enemies. This is like an M claim. The ideas of Vikings wearing horn helmets is incorrect because okay, so here the ideas of Vikings wearing horn helmets is incorrect. Here you get a what happened? Oh no, what's going on here? Serious? Okay, here we go. Here the ideas of Vikings wearing horn helmets is incorrect. You're gonna set a period, right? And then you erase this because you're not just delete that. And then capital A, obviously. According to source 1, it says that there is no picture evidence that they wear horn helmets. The only actual Vikings helmets discovered have horns on it. Didn't have horns on it. So one thing I'm okay with students paraphrasing, but I'm actually not. I want you to use direct quotes. Okay, so although this is good, this evidence, this person did a good job with this evidence, I want you to actually use the right quotes, and they could have. And then he or she jumps into the explanation. This shows that the idea of Vikings horn helmets is incorrect because there's no scientific or archaeological evidence that they did. The only real Viking helmet didn't have horns. This idea was probably circulated in 1800s when they made up a combination of stories about them. Okay, so the evidence is about an S+, I think. Furthermore, Vikings weren't just out to war and robbing enemies, right? Again, period, erase the because. According to source A, it says that normally they were just farming barley, rye, and oats. They also raised animals, including cattle, whatever. This describes that the Vikings weren't always at war and were mostly in peace. They made farms for food and had little family-owned farms to raise animals, though occasionally I had to go to war. Explanation is about another S+. In conclusion, the Vikings didn't wear horn helmets and were mostly peaceful, farming and raising livestock. So in conclusion, here you should talk about how we are wrong again, right? Because you are kind of restating your claim again. So this overall, this is about an S+, I think, if I was give it an overall grade. And then we get to student sample D. Our ideas of Vikings were or are undeniably incorrect because they were not dirty, violent, robbing enemies. We thought they were. That's a great claim. Okay. Instead, they maintained personal hygiene, and most of them were just farmers. Great. Based on source 1, it states, neither were Vikings scruffy, dirty, or smelly. Archaeologists have found all kinds of personal hygiene implements while excavating Viking sites, like tweezers, razors, combs, and ear cleaners, made from animal bones and antlers. Apparently, Vikings also bathe at least once a week, which is much more than Europeans in the same time period. Okay, so that's great evidence. This evidence I love this language that this person uses. This evidence exemplifies that Vikings prioritized hygiene because they used natural resources to create products that would benefit them. If they were the people we thought they were, they wouldn't have taken all the time to create such things. In fact, they were even cleaner than most Europeans at the time because they had such a desire to maintain hygiene. But why didn't we have such a perspective of Europeans? Oh, it's because we created a stereotype of people in one group, the one who went on expeditions. And whenever we heard the word Viking, we automatically associated with extreme negative terms and therefore wrong. That's a really awesome explanation. Furthermore, here we have a transition word again. Also, in source 1, it states, the main occupation of Vikings wasn't sailing off to war, robbing enemies. So here, this evidence is directly connected to the claim, right? They didn't just rob people or were dirty, right? It has to be connected to the claim. The main occupation of Vikings wasn't sailing off to war, robbing enemies. It was farming. Though they did occasionally have to go to war, but who doesn't, right? Most grew barley, rye, and oats. This evidence illustrates that Vikings were fairly normal, right? Most people throughout history have been farmers, and most people throughout history have been fighting each other. So where did this come from? The Vikings were not dangerous people, but maybe if we hadn't been so one-faced, we could have seen that the Vikings didn't have the intention to be seen so negative. Farming is not a violent occupation, but we definitely made it seem so. We were immensely incorrect to have these false perspectives on such people. In conclusion, our ideas of the Vikings was mostly and definitely false because they tremendously cared about hygiene and were not violent or dangerous. One thing I would like you to do, so I hope that you guys kind of understand what makes a weak piece of writing versus what makes a stronger piece of writing, or what makes a solid piece of writing, right? There are structures you have to follow. Your claim needs to answer the prompt. Some of you, when you write, you literally get tangled up in your own words. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. For example, if I ask you, are cats better than dogs? Some of you guys will start talking about meowing and catnip, no reason, right? You can say cats are better than dogs because they are easier to take care of. Period. Or dogs are better than cats because they are more friendly, right? And then you can start jumping into your sources, right? Think about what you're gonna write before you write it, and then jump in, and then come back. Read this to yourself. Read your writing to yourself, right? I know for a fact that some of you look at your writing and you see those little red lines. That means it's misspelled. It's not spelled correctly, but you still submit it. You have to be very careful with your writing, right? Read it to yourself. Read it out loud if it makes sense. It's okay to take your time and do the work correctly, because this is really, really important. It's important to me, it's important to you, and it is important to your family members. You are going to become better writers this year, and I will support you as much as I can. But I need you to actually put the effort to read this out loud, to do the checklist, right? Do I have a claim? Do I have relevant evidence? Did I explain my evidence? Did I check my grammar and punctuation? Did I read it out loud to make sure it makes sense and it flows correctly? It's going to be one of those years where we're going to push ourselves to become amazing readers and amazing writers, and it's going to be difficult. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I will support you, and the other teachers will support you as well. You're so ready for this. On Wednesday, you will be doing the select the response. I will let you know how you did. I will let you know how you did. I will check in with every single one of you. And on Thursday, you're doing the retake for the CEE. You're also going to have only one source again. You're going to have 2 pieces of evidence and 2 explanations, right? You will have a conclusion that's going to repeat your claim. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be amazing. You got this.